So welcome everybody, thanks for joining this afternoon, and particularly thank you to Anthony from the AAT for joining us, who's just going to help us give a bit of an overview of the potential implications of the decision that came out a couple of weeks ago around the introduction of the new AAT qualification, the 2022 qualification. Some of you may remember it was originally going to be a 2021 qualification, but because of the various disruptions of the pandemic, the AAT made the sensible decision to not try and introduce that in September of 21. I think people had their hands full with all manner of other things. It was originally, got somebody else coming through the waiting room, just let them in. So they originally delayed the introduction of the new qualification through to February of 2022. So we were all steam ahead for that in the next few months. But a couple of weeks ago, a decision was made to actually delay that through to September of 2022. So to continue with starts on the current 2016 qualification through until the end of next August, and then have the new qualification introduced from September 2022. So we were going to be hearing from Anthony shortly just around the reasons for that delay, the implications of the delay, but I wondered whether it might be worth actually just summarizing some of the implications of the new qualification. I've got my colleague Crystal with us on the call this afternoon, who's actually been heavily involved in the development of the new qualification. So I don't know, Crystal, just briefly, whether the two of us might be able to summarize why we're so excited about this new qualification.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a slide I could share if you could enable the share screen.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Actually, this is the first update since 2016. Let me just give you the share screen facility there, Crystal. So the last new qualification was introduced in 2016, and actually I believe had pretty much been written back in 2014. So as many of you will be aware, quite a lot has happened in the world of accountancy over the last 6 or 7 years. So I think a great time for the AT to have a major upgrade in their qualification. And in fact, to me, it's the biggest change I've seen in a couple of decades. I don't think I can remember one as significant for a long, long time. Often it's just a matter of reshuffling content, but I think in terms of the actual content covered, this is probably the most significant change I've certainly seen for a long time. What are your thoughts, Crystal?
Yeah, definitely. I think the changes that have come in are absolutely needed. I think the update is to make the qualification more relevant and sort of structured towards the role in finance now. So some of the major changes that we see are the introduction of the themes. So we've now got those 4 themes that have been brought in across all levels that are focused around technology, communication, sustainability and ethics, which are, I think you agree, are absolutely relevant to roles at any level in finance. So that's certainly one major change that comes in with the new qualification.
That mirrors, I think, what the high level institutes like ICAW, ACCA, CIMA, they also have similar themes throughout their qualifications in the same way the AAT have introduced. And I'm sure, we will all agree that things like sustainability, technology are just fundamental to roles in finance now.
Yeah, definitely. It does give a real good grounding and sort of introduction through into those higher levels where we see them as well. The other major changes have been the introduction of a more business aware element to across all levels. So we've got the business environment, business awareness, and then some changes at level 4 that have brought in some new sort of current relevant topics. as well. So that changing role of the accountant, the sort of need for a greater understanding of the business internal structure and the external environment has really been recognised in the new qualification.
That's certainly something I hear from employers that we work with, is that trainee accountants, school leavers, college leavers, particularly maybe coming through the AAT route, are engaged in working with clients at a much earlier stage in their careers, much earlier age than certainly I was used to many years ago. So being able to give them not just the robust technical fundamentals of AAT, the double entry, the reconciliations, journals, all of the good hardcore of accountancy skills, but to also give them some of these broader commercial awareness knowledge, I think is fantastic actually, and you know, real great innovation for the qualification. I mean, I think it's fair to say it's going to be a tougher qualification. Crystal, I know they've sort of removed a lot of the duplication of content and the duplication of assessment that currently we see in the qualification, and they've merged a couple of papers at level 3 and at level 4 to create much bigger exams for the final accounting at level 3 and the advanced management accounting at level 4. They're going to be quite challenging papers, aren't they, Crystal?
Yeah, definitely. There has been that removal of that duplication between levels and also between papers at the same level. So I think it's a much more streamlined qualification. But yeah, we do see some hefty papers now at level 3 and level 4. So that need for that structured learning through each of the levels, I think, becomes more and more important, particularly where we're looking at learners having perhaps not had the same level of experience in taking exams over recent years, coming into some quite large topic areas and quite hefty exams.
Yeah, and certainly something we've been talking about an awful lot throughout 2021 is the impact that the new qualification will have on entry points and pathways for a lot of learners. I think there's going to be a strong argument for more learners starting at level 2, more learners perhaps doing the entirety of level 2 before they move into level 3, because you don't have that duplication of content. You've got some really quite meaty exams that kick in at level 3. And actually, Anthony, I don't know whether, before we discuss the implications of the delay to the launch, whether actually you want to give a bit of an overview of the rationale for the update in the qualification itself, actually, and what your view is on that.
I think, thanks, Gareth. I think, as you've said already, AQ 2016, it's been in the market for a very long time, and as you've rightly said, was probably developed at some point back in 2013, 2014. So an absolute need for us to update the qualification, especially with the advances in technology that are happening in almost every 5 minutes. So real importance from our perspective in terms of getting the qualification absolutely relevant to the real world of what an accounting technician's day looks like now. Absolutely the same as you as well, Gareth. Our students are talking to clients a lot earlier than they would have been previously. So, that needs to be able to communicate effectively. So important, harnessing the technology and then communicating that information to clients, absolutely crucial. So a real big drive was to bring it up to date, bring it into to what the world of accountancy looks like now. I think we're really excited about how the qualification has turned out. I think feedback from providers like yourself, from employers, has been really positive. I think, if anything, the new syllabus will be an even better preparation for students that are looking to move into chartered studies after completing AAT. And I think the introduction of those business units at level 2 and level 3 is going to be make a huge difference to the pathways for those students. And certainly in conversations with other clients that have maybe used that hybrid approach before, of using bits of level 2 into level 3 or bits of level 3 into level 4, we're seeing a greater appetite now to certainly be embedding more of those units into those pathways. So I think it's a real positive change. I think it goes without saying that the update was needed. And yeah, we're really excited about it finally getting to market in September of next year.
Fantastic. And because we feel it is a you know, it is a more robust qualification, it's more up to date. I think I agree, it does will prepare students more for moving on to further qualifications. You know, we are increasingly seeing employers who favour school leaver programmes over graduate schemes, who prefer using the AAT than recruiting even relevant graduates. So that pathway from AAT into ICAW or ACCA or CIMA is becoming increasingly the norm, actually, I think we see in a lot of our classrooms. And so we were advising students and employers to embrace and adopt the new qualification as soon as possible. We would be looking to transition students, you know, from February and March next year, you know, even potentially partway through a level, to take them onto the new qualification. So we had the news a couple of weeks ago, and I know you had that slide, Crystal, so I don't know if you want to pop that back up again.
Bear with me, keep talking, it will be there in a second.
So we had the news a couple of weeks ago that, and Anthony, you'll be able to expand on this a little bit, but I think there were, well, the Crystal slide coming up. So the Q2022 assessments are now ready to be created in Atlas Cloud. However, we have not had sufficient time to fully test all required functionality. This means that it would be a very high risk to go live in February 2022 without having had the opportunity to test the whole assessment delivery process. As a result, we've taken a very difficult decision to delay the launch of Qualifications 2022 until the 1st of September of 22 of next year. That must have been a tough decision, Anthony.
A really tough decision, Gareth. And one that's absolutely not been taken lightly. And what I want to start off by saying to everybody, whether training provider or employer on this call, is we do not underestimate the impact that this is potentially having on your organisations. It's been a very difficult decision, but ultimately what we did not want to do was compromise our students. We love the new syllabus. We think that from a content perspective, it's you know, it's going to really be well received within the market. Unfortunately, because we weren't able to, the biggest, let me go back a step. So the big issue here, the driver behind us taking this decision to move the introduction date, it's all related to us changing our assessment platform. So I do want to reassure that this is nothing to do with the syllabus, and I can reassure as well that there are no plans for us to do anything at all in terms of changing what the Qualifications 22 syllabus was due to look like for the February launch. It's all down to the move of assessment platforms, and the fact is that we've not been able to undertake robust enough testing to have that confidence that if we were to launch in February, that we would be doing so with the full confidence that the platforms will hold up and that our students won't be disadvantaged. So that's ultimately led to the decision that's been taken to move that date back to the 1st of September, to give ourselves every possible opportunity to test as robustly as we need to, and to make sure that students, when they take those assessments, we can be confident that they won't have any issues with this new assessment platform.
Thanks, Anthony. And Crystal summarised on the slide there probably the key dates that now relate to the rollout of the new qualification. So any students who are registering as a new AAT student will continue to register under the current AQ 2016 syllabus through till the end of August. And then from the beginning of September, any new registrations will be on the new qualification. So no overlap, basically a clean cut from 2016 registrations. One day to the next day, it will be 2022 registrations, which actually probably falls more in line with typical recruitment processes anyway. I know we'd raised a year or so ago that the delay of the qualification to February of 2022 was actually a bit awkward, being in the middle of a typical academic year. So in lots of respects, I think that's probably going to be simpler for a lot of employers and potentially training providers to cope with. In terms of assessment dates, so there will be a kind of rollout period for the current assessment, so students can complete potentially a level under the current qualification, potentially even the full qualification, depending on how far they are through. So the final date of assessments for AQ 2016, the current qualification, will be the 30th of September of 2023. So 13 months after that final registration deadline at the end of August of next year. And then the first assessments for AQ 2022 will be within a few weeks of the 1st of September of next year. So by the time they've done a few weeks of study, attended courses, done some practice, they should be available for students to start sitting. Now we are going to be asking questions today and going forward of the AAT, just to make sure we're fully aware of the implications of this. And for those of you on the call, please feel free to drop any questions that you've got into the chat box. Anthony will either try and answer them now, or we'll try and find answers for us to feed back. But in terms of questions that we've got from our perspective, I think the first one I would ask Anthony is when the dates were confirmed for the February launch, and this is going back a year or so, there was again a 13-month window effectively left from the last point at which somebody could register for AQ 2016 and the last point that they could sit an assessment for AQ 2016. Now that 13-month period sounds like a long time when you consider that apprentices, and certainly from our perspective, the vast majority of our students are now under apprenticeships. You've got that gateway rule that from starting your studies, you cannot go through gateway for a minimum of 12 months and 1 day. It then takes typically a few weeks to organise the endpoint assessment, possibly even a few weeks to get results from the endpoint assessment. The last time around, we said the 13-month wasn't long enough, and the AAT were, I think, wise enough to take that on board and actually extended that window to a point where a student who registered would have time to finish under an apprenticeship. We seem to have gone back to the 13 months though, which when we saw that, we were a little bit frustrated, to be honest. We were assuming that the AQ 2016 assessments would be available till at least the end of 2023, but it seems to have been a 6-month delay to the launch, but only a 3-month extension to the availability. That's potentially going to be a bit awkward, Anthony.
No, I fully understand that, Gareth. And if I was to, the key feedback that ourselves and our teams have had since the announcement a couple of weeks ago, whether it be from the training provider audience, the employer audience, or student audience, is really around that cut-off date. I recognise that it's not viable if you've got an apprenticeship starting in the summer of 2022. Those dates are just not going to work. Even if you had somebody with no resits, absolutely flew through the qualification, just the requirements around gateway and the apprenticeship make it very, very difficult. And I think on that specific point around apprenticeship starts, maybe a view needs to be taken. Do we need to hold off of AQ 16 at a set period in next year and not get those students registered onto their apprenticeship until the 1st of September under qualifications 22? I think, as you've said, Gareth, particularly around that point, it's traditionally when we see school leaver programs start around September, sort of September, October would be where we see the bulk of those programs start. So I think a view needs to be taken with those starts in the sort of latter summer months of 2022 as to when we want to start those programs. But to address the specific question around the date, it is to do with the rollout of the new assessment platform and needing to build in enough time to for students to take those final assessments under AQ 2016, to build in marking, to build in any appeals, and to make sure we can go through that due process to complete any students within the deadlines that we have set with our current assessment platform provider. What I will update you on from conversations this morning, that due to that level of feedback that we have had from a number of our stakeholders, that is being discussed further at AAT. Myself and other colleagues across the team have been making representations for our client base, really feeding in the potential impact of that September 2023 cutoff. It would be dishonest of me to try and say this is something that's going to change. I don't want to give any false assurances. However, it is something that's being discussed later on this week at the top table to have a look at what's going to be feasible there, and if there's any opportunity whatsoever to look at those dates again. So I'm sorry I can't give you a better answer than that, but it's an honest answer.
And just perhaps to feed back into those discussions, but it's great to hear that it's being talked about. It wouldn't be latter summer starts, Anthony. We'd be talking about anything after about March. And in fact, I had one of my managing directors suggesting that even anything after January would be really difficult with that time frame. So you could be talking about a large chunk of time where I wouldn't be comfortable saying to clients, no, wait till the 1st of September. That could be 7 or 8 months that you're asking them to delay. I mean, the alternative obviously is if somebody was to start under AQ 2016, say towards the back end of the summer when they've not got the big enough time frame to complete, they could transition onto the new qualification midway through a level, which raises, I suppose, the second key question, which is, what will the transitional rules be, particularly in terms of fees? Because I'm guessing employers are not going to be keen to pay a fee to register under AQ 2016 if the prospect is they have to then pay another fee to transition them onto the new qualification for the same level. So do you know what the plan will be for transitional arrangements around fees?
To jump on the first point again for a second, Gareth, absolutely agree with you. It's not, look, the impact of the change of date is not going to just affect those late summer starts. I think what I was referring to, if you had a cohort that would traditionally start in August, the impact of maybe pushing that back a few weeks for Quals 22 wouldn't be felt. But absolutely, for those that are, I'd even go as far as saying I've got clients that have started school leaver programs this September, whose students will be wrapped up in what's going to be the best pathway for them to now complete. And equally for those starting in the early part of 22, where it seems as though the market is landing at the moment is that they will look to transition. So they will commence on AQ 2016 in early next year if they had cohorts that were due to start early next year, and then look to transition across to qualifications 22 in September and complete the syllabus under qualifications 22. With regards to the transitional fees, it's another point that's open for discussion, and again, feedback has been significant on that point, and again is an area that's being discussed later this week as to AAT revisiting what those transitional arrangements specifically around the fees could look like in light of the fact that we've changed those start dates. I completely understand the sentiment that you could be in a scenario where somebody's, let's say a level 3 student, they've completed the bulk of their qualification under AQ 2016, potentially just have a single assessment to complete the qualification. From a client perspective, then having to pay that full fee for the level 3 Quals 22 registration, it's not going to feel like value for money. So that's absolutely being discussed and looked at within the team at the moment. I don't have a date or a deadline on when we'd be making any announcement or any updates on that, but it's another key area that's being discussed this week.
Good, no, that's good to hear, because obviously, I mean, this delay, the fact that it came after the onboarding of this most recent intake, where all plans and all study planners were therefore based on a transition to Quals 22, there's going to be a lot of admin work on employers and training providers to now unpick that and go back to assuming AQ 2016 for another 6 months. We don't want to be burdening those employers and training providers with additional costs on top of the admin costs they're therefore going to be suffering as a result of this.
That's fully understood.
Crystal, I mean, in terms of that 13-month window and the transitional arrangements, I mean, do you think they're perhaps the 2 key points?
They certainly are really key points, and that need to have in place transitional arrangements and to know those well in advance is going to be really important for all of us, really, as training providers, students, and for employers. Something else, though, which has certainly come to light in conversations I've been having over the last week or so, we do have learners, some that are distance learning learners who were planning to start Quals 22 in February. They obviously don't want to be putting off their studies until to start in September. So we're encouraging everyone to make sure that they continue with their studies or they start their studies as planned as soon as possible. But we are receiving questions around when will materials be available to start studying units under Quals 22. And as part of that, the earlier that someone starts studying, the earlier they're going to want their assessment. And so it's really important to be able to give that guideline on when the assessments will be available for Quals 22. Is that something that you can confirm when we will know those dates? I understand they'll be rolled out over a period of time. So
a couple of points that I can answer on that, Crystal. Firstly, in relation to AQ 2016, I want to just give some assurances here again. Obviously, we've now got that longer gap, so with scheduled synoptic windows up until the cutoff for AQ 2016, they are now being reviewed. So in terms of additional synoptic windows over summer of 2023, I need to make sure I get my years right there. That's being looked at the moment. We're hoping that we should come out with an answer quickly on that. With regards the rollout of assessments for qualifications 22, as I'm sure Gareth and Crystal are aware, and Dave and potentially others in the room, we were looking at that being quite a gradual rollout over a period of best part of sort of 2.5 to 3 months, with the original planned launch date of February. I've been made aware this morning that that rollout will be shorter than it would have been had we gone ahead with the February launch. One of the things that we want to make sure we get right here is because of it now coming in September rather than February, we want to make sure that we get the ordering of assessments that are available right. So, it may be logical, under the initial plans that it was, level 2 was going to be those first main assessments that became available. Actually, if we're hearing strong feedback from training providers, from employers, that we desperately need some of those level 4 assessments available right at the top end of Quals 22, we want to be able to take that feedback on board to then inform the phasing of those assessments. But we recognise that we need to respond to this quickly so that people can plan. But I think we want to make sure we do so in consultation with training providers like yourselves and employers to make sure that we get that phasing right. But what I can categorically say is that the rollout will be a lot swifter, than we were originally planning with the February launch date.
Great, thank you. Just to pick up on in terms of the synoptic windows, as you mentioned there, so that's being reviewed and we can hopefully expect to see more synoptic windows towards the phase out of the qualification?
Absolutely. I've been given that categorically this morning, that there will be additional synoptic windows coming in for summer 2023.
Great. I do have another couple of questions around sort of those syllabus changes and the impact of them. One in particular is the Finance Acts. So obviously the Finance Acts are updating. We were planning for AQ 16 to continue with Finance Act 20 and then Quals 22 to pick up on Finance Act 21. With the delay through to September, I think that creates quite a bit of uncertainty around what Finance Acts would be appropriate to be testing. When will we know? So
there's a fairly large piece of work going on at AAT's end at the moment to look at what's going to be the best solution for that. My colleagues in our education team have come up with 3 different potential scenarios. Key stakeholders, training providers, employers are being consulted on that this week. And off the back of that, we will then be able to give a decision as to what is going to be that route forward with the Finance Act. So that should be coming through reasonably swiftly as well.
Great, thank you. And I just have one more question before I hand back to Gareth, who I think might have a couple more. So you mentioned at the start of this session that the changes they're down to the assessment platform, and therefore it's not expected there will be any changes to the specifications or the content or structure of the syllabus. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Fabulous. I guess just one other thing is that this was originally going to be qualifications 21. So we were expecting a September 21 launch. It got delayed to February 22. We've now had this delayed to September 22. What kind of comfort is there that we will have this new syllabus in September 22? Because it's obviously a huge amount of preparation work that goes in for all of us, training providers, learners and employers, to that new syllabus being taken on board.
That's a really fair question, Chris, and can understand the reason for asking that. I think, as Gareth mentioned up at the top of the session here, the decision to move the original plan date of September 21 was driven completely out of our hands, global pandemic, and it was just felt, we need to take pressure out of the market. We don't want to be throwing a brand new syllabus into the equation after everything else that all of our audiences were having to deal with. In terms of us delaying from February or moving from February to September, it gives us a lot more time to make sure that the assessment platform is tested properly, to make sure that we're absolutely 100% confident that it will hold up and that our students won't have issues during those assessments. It has to happen. We need to make it happen. The only scenario, if the pilot, so we're running pilots with the new assessment platform, as I'm sure you'll be aware, colleagues at FI, from early next year. And the only scenario, if that was an absolute disaster, then obviously we'd need to take stock and take a view on what's going to be realistic. But we are all guns blazing and all steam ahead to make sure that we get this September launch and we get it right.
Thanks, Anthony. A specific point that we now face is some of the students that we had starting literally in the last few weeks on a new level with a new employer, because the plan was going to be to transition them onto the new qualification in February as soon as possible. Those students registered under the short qualification,
yep.
Whereas now they are going to have to complete under 2016. So, yep. And I'm not the expert on the mechanics of this, but they're presumably now going to need to register for the full level under AQ 2016, which potentially has a fee implication for those students. But the other thing that occurs to me is with the short qualifications, they don't get specific grades for the exams they sit, and whereas now that they're going to complete under the full level under AQ 2016, it seems a bit unfair that those students won't be able to get the assessment of whether they're, whether they've achieved a distinction or a merit or whatever for the level. What's the thinking on those sorts of students?
So my advice for those students, we've got mutual clients that have been impacted by this, where the typical scenario we've seen is they've registered on the level 3 bookkeeping, and the plan was they'd do first couple of units AVBK and FAPR under AQ 16 and then transition across to qualifications 22. You're right in that anybody registered on the short qualification, rather than getting pass, merit or a distinction, it's simply a competent or not yet competent, and that's based on the way that the qualification is registered with Ofqual. We aren't, they're non-graded qualifications. So my advice to anybody in that scenario, and just to reassure on one point there, Gareth, there's no additional cost more than what they would have paid had they registered straight onto the level 3 advanced diploma in accounting. So students will need to pay their AAT membership fee to register onto the full qualification. My advice to any clients that are affected by that is to get registered ASAP, because that means that any subsequent assessments those students take, they will get that pass, merit or distinction rather than simply the competent or not yet competent.
Okay, so basically, because they shouldn't have sat any assessments. Well, I don't know, Crystal, you'd probably be more of an expert on this actually. Will they have sat an assessment yet?
So those who perhaps have done level 2 bookkeeping, if they're then going to complete the rest of level 2, they probably will have sat one assessment by now. For level 3, I think we are around about the time when they would be setting assessments. So it would be something that they would have to move on pretty quickly to move over to the full qualification. In terms of the fees, just to ask, they will have paid for the short qual and now they'll have to pay an annual membership. Whereas if they were completing that level within a year, it would only have been the annual membership. Will there be any kind of credit given for the fact that they have paid for the short qual as well?
So the
register looks like it's exactly the point that Peter's raising in the chat box, I think.
So the fee that they would have paid for the short qualification is the standard AAT admission fee. So regardless of if somebody had registered on the short qualification or the full qualification, they would have still paid that one-off admission fee as well as their AAT student membership. So the fact that they've paid that one-off membership fee, they won't then be charged, oh sorry, that one-off registration fee, they won't then be charged it again when they upgrade their registration to the full qualification. Does that make sense?
It does. And if a learner is caught that they have already taken an assessment and therefore they have just got a competent or not yet, well, hopefully a competent for it, and they're now moving over to the full qualification, they can resit that assessment in order to get a percentage grade if they're looking towards getting a distinction, or they want to be able to get that percentage grade.
Yeah, there's nothing stopping the student if they so wish, if they do want to resit it again and get that percentage grade, they're able to do so. One thing I would say, both for training providers and employers in the room, is that in that scenario, one thing that's really important to make sure is that when the student is scheduled for their actual AAT assessment, that they're scheduled as an AQ 2016 advanced or the full qualification as opposed to the short qualification, to make sure that they get the that percentage grade rather than the competent or not yet competent.
Thanks, Anthony. Crystal, anything more that you have from your side?
I don't think so. I think that covers the main questions that I had.
Does anyone else in the room have any questions they want to ask? Well, Peter's just going back to that previous point around, and it did occur to me as well, actually, Peter, I mean, although the off-qual registration doesn't grade the short quals, presumably the AAT know what percentage a student scored in, you know, say the advanced bookkeeping exam. Can that not be, is it beyond the wit of man that could be then credited to whatever they then do for the rest of a level 3 if they have sat one of the exams?
I think it comes down to the regulatory requirement there that we wouldn't be allowed to apply a percentage grade to somebody that sat it under the short qualification. I've had a couple of conversations around this already with colleagues, and it feels as though there's no wriggle room. There's nothing we can do particularly on that topic to give that percentage grade. And I really understand, you know, the students want to do as best as they can in their overall qualification. I can understand disappointment that they've potentially been capped at that 70% if they've passed that assessment, but there's no, it's not something that we're able to do, unfortunately.
And if they did choose to then resit the exam effectively under the full level, is there scope that they could do that for free?
I can take it away, Gareth, and get a view on that.
That, you know, obviously they don't, you know, nobody wants to resit an exam that you've passed, so they would only be doing it because they want to get the grade, and it may be a nice compromise if at least the AAT didn't charge the exam fee for it. Yeah, Peter's made another point which I think is valid as well, that the new short qual will be or will it be graded?
Yes, it will. That's again, that's how it's being registered with off-qual this time around. It's being registered differently, which will allow for those percentage grades to be given.
Cool. I suppose back to sort of previous point that's been raised, because I know there has been frustration amongst colleagues of mine and Crystal and our production team that seemingly the AAT can't help themselves but tinker with the content of the specification, even at quite late stages. And also changing the old AQ 2016 stuff, which seems increasingly pointless now, but just creates a lot of work when we've got quite a lot of work to do anyway. can we expect that there won't be any further tinkering with the actual content between now and September?
It's a question that's been asked a lot, Gareth. I've responded to this one earlier. I've been given absolute assurances there are no plans to make any syllabus changes whatsoever. This decision's purely been based on the transition of assessment platforms, nothing to do with the qualification syllabus or specifications.
Brilliant, thank you. So any further questions, Dave? I don't know if you've got, I see my colleague Dave there, I don't know if you've got any observations or questions that you've got that we haven't answered.
It's really just an observation. I think that over the last 2 years, we've seen lots of students that have reached the end of a level and decided to take a break while we had a pandemic to deal with. And we're seeing those students sometimes being very, very, very slow to come back, and many of them have not come back yet to study. Anecdotally, I hear a lot of that is because I don't really have time now because I found other things to do with my time other than study. I just wonder if you're going to see another group of students now that have been waiting for the syllabus to change before they started their next level. And again, I've heard people say, I'm going to wait till February to start, and then I'll start the new syllabus, that have now got another 6 months to wait. I'm concerned that from the point of view of, I think that our apprenticeship students are fine because they are mentored all the way through by us, by their employer, but it's those people that are maybe doing evening classes, distance learning classes, that don't necessarily have the support of a provider behind them in the same way, that don't have the support of an employer behind them, that I worry you're going to have a generation of AAT students that are stuck at the end of level 3 that never really got level 4 finished. I don't know if you've really given any thought to those people.
Absolutely, it's been given thought, and I think that distance learning market where and you know, maybe people that are studying of their own volition rather than that structure of an apprenticeship program, historically we've seen those students would typically take longer to complete a qualification anyway. And I do think, yeah, it's obviously a situation that we're having a very, very close look at, because yeah, you have got that that potential now that somebody's waited, planning to wait till February. Actually, what's the best thing for me to do now? Do I start on AQ16? Do I wait until September of next year? Obviously, that's going to have an impact from our perspective, from an AAT perspective, because of course we want students commencing our qualifications and completing our qualifications. They do have that option, as we've spoken about, of transitioning. So if they do get started on their AQ16 qualification now, they've got that opportunity. You know, still the best part of 2 years to complete the current, you know, whichever level they commence on under AQ 2016, but with that backup option of transitioning over to qualifications 22 if they've not completed in time. But I completely take your point, Dave, and yes, it is one that we're very alert to.
And the other thing that I don't know how much assurance you can give me on it, but we've noticed this autumn that the school leavers that have joined us, we suspected that there will be gaps in their learning because of the disruption they suffered doing A levels, GCSEs. I'm surprised at kind of what the gap is between kind of like doing GCSEs, A levels, and then coming and doing professional exams whilst also being in employment. We've seen a huge increase in the number of students that have kind of suffered from kind of pre-exam anxiety. We've had students that have had full-blown panic attacks on the way to exams, you know, really struggling with the idea because they haven't sat an exam in 2 years because there weren't any A-levels, there weren't any GCSEs. And these are all things that we're having to adjust the way that we deliver and that we teach to help prepare people for exams in a completely different way, something we've never done before. I've got a concern that next summer's intake are going to be similar because they've missed an equivalent amount of schooling, and I'm a little bit nervous about them doing an exam on a brand new system in September, seeing the issues that we've had with some of the other institutes moving to a new exam platform over the last year. So I'm glad that you have recognised there are issues right now, but it's something that I'm going to be keeping my fingers and everything crossed next September, because that's something that I say some of the students that I've been dealing with over the last few weeks, I just think that, you know, a failure of exam software would absolutely finish them off. It would just be, you know, absolutely horrendous. So it's something that I really hope that is going to work. And yeah, if there is any help you need testing, you know, I'm sure we've got some tutors that would happily sit a mock exam or two under exam conditions just to check that the software isn't going to fall apart.
Absolutely, David. I know our team of regional account managers will be reaching out to our to all of our training providers to look at participants for for the further pilot and testing that we're going to be running in early part of next year. So yeah, you can be rest assured somebody will be in contact with you on that, Dave.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, point that Dave made. I mean, I did see somebody a week or so ago on an online forum, a student basically saying, "Oh well, I'm just going to wait till next September to start my next level now," which you kind of think, what, you're going to wait a year just to crack on? So I think, you know, good communication around a sensible transitional approach to fees where students aren't going to end up out of pocket, and then also I think communication from providers and from the AAT around, you know, how to do that transition, you know, making sure that they're not going to lose credits, particularly whether, you know, those papers have been merged at level 3 and level 4, to make sure that students understand which papers they should pass under the old qualification to get the credits that they deserve from the new qualification. So yeah, I think a sort of joined up effort on the communication will be really useful in coming months.
Of course.
Anything else you wanted to add to finish off, Anthony?
Just a couple of other points. Firstly, if there are any employers here that would like to be consulted on the issue that Crystal brought up earlier around which Finance Act we'll continue to be using for the rest of AQ 2016, if you just pop your details into the chat here, I'll be more than happy to pass those on to our education team to make sure that you're part of those consultations. But I mean, the thing I want to finish up, as I've said at the start, I don't underestimate the impact that this change has had on everybody. And, you know, I apologize wholeheartedly for everything that this has caused for all of our colleagues in the room. It's a great syllabus. We wanted to make sure we got it right, and we didn't want to jeopardize the success of what we do feel is a fantastic syllabus by letting our students and our providers and all of our employers down through launching without an assessment platform that we couldn't be 100% hand on heart we were ready for. So we've taken the decision, as we said at the start, it was a very difficult decision to make, but it's been done, you know, at the heart of the decision has been around protecting our students, protecting all of our stakeholders, to make sure that when we do come to market with the qualification in September, that we're going to do so without the disruptions that we could have potentially seen by launching in February.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Anthony, and thank you for joining us and trying to help answer the questions today. So thanks everyone for your time. I hope that's been useful. There will be, I'm sure, plenty of communication in coming weeks, both from the AAT and from First Intuition. But just get in touch if you've got any questions you think we can help you with. But yeah, thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your weeks.